How does the media affect policymaking? In what now seems like ancient history, the media once simply reported the news reactively. Today, with the internet, mobile devices, and 24/7 news cycles, the media makes the news proactively. How does this worldwide trend play out in China or relate to China? After all, the media in China are organs of the state, and as such support the national interest as determined by the state. While Western media, as everyone knows, castigates China's media as one-way propaganda, the deep question is, with respect to international affairs, whether the arrow of causation can point from the Chinese media to the Chinese government, such that opinion can influence policy. Moreover, how does China view the international media with respect to influencing China-related issues in the world? Understand the Chinese media to be closer to China. Since the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, almost all media have been state-owned and state-operated. But with economic reforms beginning in the late 1970s, the market began to play an increasing role in the Chinese media. Today, with intensifying competition, diversified content, and even investigative reporting, China's mainland media is becoming progressively more commercial. By mid-2016, over 700 million people in China were using the internet. This is more than double the population of the United States. Online media platforms have been growing quickly. I speak with three thought leaders in China. Hu Xijin is the editor-in-chief of Global Times, the international affairs newspaper published by People's Daily. Ambassador Su Ge is president of the China Institute of International Studies and a former diplomat who served in several countries, including the United States. And Xu Anbin is associate dean of the School of Journalism and Communication at Tsinghua University. Global Times was founded in 1993 by People's Daily, the party's official newspaper, as its international affairs newspaper. With daily editions in Chinese and English, Global Times has become one of the most successful publications in China, sometimes taking different editorial positions from that of other major Chinese media. Global Times is also one of China's most controversial publications. Its supporters say it is China's voice of full-throated patriotism and radiates positive energy. Its critics find it inflammatory, inciting nationalism and fomenting hatred. Among all major Chinese media, Global Times stands out because it is most often quoted by foreign media, and foreign media are also split about it. The Economist called it a remarkable innovation which addresses realms once thought taboo, while the Financial Times named it China's outsized, outrageous, and oft-maligned nationalist tabloid. The signature style of Global Times has been set largely by its editor-in-chief, Hu Xijin, and some would say that Hu himself is even more controversial than the newspaper. Hu became editor-in-chief in 2005. He is well known both as a bellicose hardliner and as the reporter of a complex China. Look at the Chinese media in general. It's very broad, very different kinds of publications. How would you classify Global Times within the spectrum of the Chinese media? Where does it fall?
环球时报呢是一个以报道国际事务为主的报纸。
Global Times is a newspaper that mainly reports global affairs. We are affiliated to People's Daily. They appointed me, and they can dismiss me anytime as well. At the same time, we live in a market. Since the day we are born, we have to make ends meet, sell newspapers and advertisements to feed the team and make a profit, some of which we render to People's Daily. In this sense, we don't really stick to conventions and have a strong willingness to try new things. In the meantime, we are a prudent newspaper with a boundary.
同时呢，又要有自己的慎重和底线的这么一个报纸。
It should be said that Global Times does influence Chinese society. The fact that we are often at the center of disputes and discussions reflects our influence. Before Global Times, Chinese media were quite conservative when reporting international affairs. For example, they used to cover what's good for China and the friendliness between China and other countries, and tended to miss out what's bad for China and the unfriendly things. But this no-go zone has been gradually broken through by Global Times. Now you can read other countries criticizing and condemning China in Global Times. It should be said that Global Times has enhanced the social tolerance toward negative information. We have a slogan that we should endeavor to break new ground, i.e., to continuously break through the no-go zone in a sound and safe manner.
How do you develop diverse voices for Global Times that are diverse means they're different, and if they're different from official government positions or what officials would say. How do you go about choosing which of the diverse voices that you will promote?
我觉得这个社会啊，它本身就是丰富多彩的，社会本身就是多元的。
To me, the society itself is colorful and diversified. When we present the real society, definitely there will be different voices. The different voices are the essence of the society. If you completely muffle them, the things you present are fake. So naturally, we're presenting different voices. Meanwhile, we should stay in line with the Constitution and China's basic political system.
要保持一致和契合。
I'm not new in giving it to you that Global Times takes nationalistic positions that are much more aggressive than patriotic positions. Do you agree with that?
民族主义这个词啊，是一个贬义词。
Nationalism is a negative term. When people use it, they are expressing disapproval, saying your paper is low in taste. So no paper would call itself nationalist. In the past, the Chinese media were too mild, pretentious, and overcautious. We seldom talked back and explained. That's why the Chinese always talk cautiously, colorless, with no expression on their faces. As to Global Times, we are more real. We express the true feelings and demands of Chinese society. We have rich expressions on our faces. They are the true expressions of Chinese society. What we do is only present that to the world. Some people are just not used to it.
I don't want China dictating to me, then President-elect Donald Trump told Fox News. Earlier, he had had a phone conversation with Taiwan leader Tsai Ing-wen, breaking U.S. diplomatic tradition, which triggered a Chinese government rebuke. After Trump openly questioned whether his administration would continue to respect the 4 decades-old One China policy, Global Times published an editorial asserting that the One China policy cannot be bargained or traded. The U.S. media uses very strong language to attack Trump, but that's their own leader. But as the Chinese media, you don't criticize the leaders in your own country, but you have the criticism in a strong way of leaders of the U.S. in this case. Is that a cultural difference? How do you explain that difference? The U.S. media will attack its own leaders, like Trump, much more aggressively than it will attack foreign leaders.
首先，我们批评特朗普，这个用比较激烈的语言批评特朗普，这是因为特朗普惹中国了。
Firstly, we criticize Trump with harsh words because Trump has offended China. He tested the bottom line of China's policy, and so we criticize him harshly. I believe we have a solid moral ground to criticize him, but it's not personal abuse. We only criticize his policy, his behavior, but not personal abuse. This is very important. As to the U.S. media's criticism of their leaders, I don't think that's anything for them to be proud of. That's according to the US Constitution. The US has adopted a multi-party system. Presidents come and go. It's the rule of the game for the media to criticize the government and parties. China's constitution is different. The Communist Party is the leading force in China. The stability and development of China call for the authority of the party. The US doesn't need the authority of Trump nor the government, so they can criticize. It's nothing to be proud of. To the US and its media, I don't know whether they can attack religious beliefs or the constitutional system. I believe that there are things off-limit for criticism. Isn't that so? So there are no-go zones or sensitive areas in every country. We should understand each other. The rules shouldn't all be set by the US. The US president can criticize China as he wishes, but Chinese media don't need to follow the rules set by US media when criticizing Trump. If those are the rules of how media operates, it's not workable. And China should have its own rules. These two sets of rules are conflicting. We should be humble and modest. Don't cross the other's bottom line. But on this matter, obviously Trump is a provoker.
那么中国有中国的规则，那么两个规则互相碰撞，大家呢还是要彼此尽量的彼此谦让和谦逊，是吧？不要过于逼对方。但是在这个问题上，显然是特朗普是一个主动的挑衅者。
If Donald Trump is going to put on the table questioning the one China policy as a bargaining chip, well, maybe we'll put on the table the use of force as our bargaining chip in some way. Now, clearly what was said there is not the official position of the Chinese government. So how do you view a Chinese media saying something that is interpreted as quite aggressive in the Western media, but it's not the official position of the Chinese government? Is that helpful?
Oh, now you can see that there is tremendous tolerance, and we call it inclusiveness. We have quite a number of important newspapers like the People's Daily, and then we have Xinhua News Agency, and we also have Global Times. Actually, when you look at where it belongs to, it's part of the People's Daily apparatus. Now, this also shows that People's Daily also has tremendous tolerance, and it allows a platform so that the people can bring out opinions which may differ from what's carried on in the front page of the People's Daily. I think that China's mass media, compared with, let's say, 30 years ago, we have so many branches, and there is a tremendous tolerance.
The media can insert itself into foreign policy. In September 2016, Global Times claimed that Singapore had pushed to include an international tribunal's ruling against China in the South China Sea in the final document of the Non-Aligned Movement Summit. Singapore's ambassador to Beijing wrote to editor-in-chief Hu Xijin that the actions and words attributed to Singapore in the article were false and unfounded. Hu Xijin said he stood by his story, and Singapore's ambassador responded, "Our positions are not identical, but neither are we opposed." Analysts point out that by publicizing Singapore's stance on the South China Sea, Global Times played a part in empowering online public opinion. Foreigners assume that the relationship between the Chinese government and the Chinese media goes in one direction. The government controls the media. But can at least influence flow in the opposite direction? Can the Chinese media influence the Chinese government?
You cannot imagine such a so-called tabloid newspaper can exist 10 years ago in China, because at that time there only one voice, especially in terms of international affairs. But now at least you have different or multi-layered voices that it can actually influence Chinese official decision-making in many ways. A more recent example is the treatment of Singapore. I think in terms of the Singapore's role in the South China Sea crisis, Global Times actually play a very important role in transmitting, I think, the online public opinion and the government opinion. So they have actually reached a consensus in that they actually would think Singapore play a very important role, and Singapore should be more responsible in dealing with China and the US and also China and ASEAN relationship. So this is, I call the media diplomacy. So this media diplomacy now become a kind of more routine way rather than just official diplomacy.
But in China, occasions of media diplomacy do not mean that media and public opinion in general play a significant role when officials make decisions. In 2010, a Chinese fishing trawler collided with two Japanese Coast Guard patrol boats in disputed waters around the Daihu Islands. Following the incident, anti-Japanese protests were held in Chinese cities, including Beijing, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Shenyang. Despite public discontent, high-level contacts didn't stop. On the sidelines of that year's APEC summit, Chinese President Hu Jintao had talks with Japanese Prime Minister Naoto Kan.
我们中国的外交政策，特别是新中国的外交政策，从周恩来时
China's foreign policy, especially New China's foreign policy, has stuck to one principle since the Zhou Enlai era. That is, that power is centralized. Foreign policy decisions are made by a few top leaders. Principally, others shouldn't voice their opinions at will. Nothing is trivial when it comes to foreign affairs. This kind of tradition has been carried on since it was first formulated. So our foreign policy decision-making process, which is essential to foreign affairs, is relatively centralized. Looking back over the years, our foreign policy has been quite consistent. Certain external incidents, including strong online public opinion, did not influence the government's analysis and judgment.
网络上这个民意汹汹来影响到我们的这方面的分析和判断。
The future of news journalism. Figures released by the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism show that half, 51%, of worldwide online users surveyed said they use social media as a news source, with 1 in 10 saying it is their main news source. In China, social media is also becoming the key information sharing platform. In February 2016, President Xi stressed the need for media convergence between traditional and new media. In China, many traditional media organizations have expanded to the internet, creating apps and using social media. Editor-in-chief Hu Xijin leverages the new media. His online talk show, Who's Talking, attracts much attention on the internet. In the show, Hu shares his views on various social phenomena, and he's not afraid of a little controversy.
环球时报的它的平台是
Global Times has multi-platforms, and the Chinese edition is only the center for content production, which provides material for articles on our website, huanqiu.com, or opinions shown on our new media platform. For example, the editorials I'm in charge with are published on our newspaper, on the huanqiu.com, and on new media platform as well, which are in the form of audio clips.
So in China, the new media has become exceedingly strong and is really a much more powerful force in China than the new media is in the U.S. for substantive issues. Do you think that's accurate?
I think China has, I think, the largest internet population now in the world, and probably more active, we call netizens, than any other country in the world. And we found that in Chinese case, actually netizens are more concerned with public affairs and news than their counterpart of U.S. netizens. Yes. And also the function of what we call a sort of social activism is also quite more active than the counterpart of U.S. So we should, when we talk about Chinese media, I would say nowadays Chinese media tend to not become just a block. It actually has more diversified stratum and also different functions when we talk about legacy media, partisan media, metropolitan media, and also social media. They all have different directions and functions.
中国呢有2个舆论场，一个呢是网上舆论场。
There are two public opinion fields. One is the online public opinion field represented by social media. The other is represented by traditional media. including their own internet platforms, which is a more official public opinion field. This is where China and other countries differ. During the early days of the internet's development, online media found topics from traditional mainstream media. They gathered information and pushed them with analysis and judgments to users, which led to or ignited the topics on social media. But in recent years, it's always social media that would first respond to breaking news or events. In turn, the mainstream media follows social media on trending issues with further interpretations, follow-ups, analysis, and in-depth reports. To some extent, social media in China are acting as a very important basis for the formation of public opinion.
社会的舆论形成中起着一个非常重要的一个基础的作用。
Because the media in China is directly under the government, the natural thought from Western analysis of the media is that the government tells the media what to do, what to think, and the media then convinces the public that that's correct. That's a wild oversimplification, in my opinion. But I'm also interested in how this arrow of causation works, because the media in today's world is more not just reactive, but often proactive. And can the media in China even go the other direction and affect government policy by representing what the public thinks?
I would bet, like I just said before, even the internet has more powerful influence than most Westerners would expect it. One thing I think is different, because I would say in US or other Western countries, you still have that partisan interest. But in this country, I think because the Chinese Communist Party represents the interest of the people, so I think they are more proactive or reactive to people's need or people's voices, probably than any other Western party. So that's why internet public opinion would become a very important factor when government make any decision.
公众的意见的交换，也就是说舆论的形成过程。
The exchange and formation of public opinion is mainly done on social media in China. Its convenience, openness, and huge capacity are more likely to bring about an exchange of opinions than traditional media. In a sense, the formation of online public opinions is faster on social media than on mainstream media.
舆论这个产生比主流媒体所形成的要快。
Social media is very easy. You get something, it looks interesting, you send it to 100 people. You don't check it to be sure it's right. And we have many, many examples of that occurs both in both countries. But I think that China is more vulnerable to false information, rumors that would spread.
We compare with Chinese and US netizens. We think Chinese netizens tend more to pass around, to share anything they have saw, anything they have seen in their website or in their Weibo pages or WeChat pages. Because Chinese, like I said, is more like a collectivist. I think they lack a kind of critical and independent thinking or so-called media literacy. So in this sense, I would say, of course, like you said, probably fake news would create more sensational impact in China, or on the other hand, China is more vulnerable to fake news. Yeah. So that's why I think the strict regulation and needed check and balance, or we could also can say this kind of government regulation is probably more necessary than any other Western country.
在网络空间发言的时候，这个特别是当他的身份不需要有这个。
There is a theory in communication called the Polarization Phenomenon, which says that some people's attitudes, stands, and positions will be polarized online as they take their ideas, views, and standpoints to extremes. When speaking one's mind online, especially anonymously, people tend to be less self-disciplined and tend to act less responsibly than they do in the real world. They will even express some very blunt ideas that they themselves dare not practice in the real world. If they can find supporters online and keep the issue or speech fermenting, then it might evolve into a group mentality or even group behavior. So we should be alert to this kind of polarization phenomenon.
所以这种极化现象也是应该警惕的。
您注意到啊，这个。
You might have noticed that it is like waves in China. When the internet was initially introduced, public opinions were very open, but after a while, they pulled back a little, tightening up a bit. Then after a while, it went open again. Then it tightened up again. This movement indicates explorations. Actually, the party and the mainstream society wish to have plenty of speech and press freedom. But the Western-style organizational structure, the kind of speech and press freedom, will lead to social instability, causing fluctuations in society. The fluctuation is what our political system cannot endure, so we are continuously exploring, pushing forward, going beyond. So the party is very positive towards internet development. It doesn't block the net. Instead, it opens up the net for people to try. This is an ongoing exploration. I think the party and the government are positive in pushing forward freedom of speech. But there is a limit to society's endurance. So I think it's not easy for China to stay active in this exploration.
社交媒体它实际上是互联网向每一个公众、每一个这个公民进行技术授权的过程。
Actually, social media breaks down technical barriers for the public and every individual. It provides everyone with access and conditions to express their own views and to transmit and deliver their views to other members of society on a large scale. Such a right, in fact, is an important pillar of freedom of speech and other basic human rights. So, in this sense, the openness and further development of social media is an inevitable trend. From the perspectives of Chinese society, it will be a process for the government, the public, government departments, and social media operators to adapt to the trend, to become more mature, and to better interact with each other. And in this process, we should also avoid social confrontation through dialogue, so that we can finally achieve social consensus to the greatest extent. Personally, I hope that our social media networks would become more and more open, and a better place for the formation of a social consensus.
有一个良性互动的过程。
所以呢，这个我们的声音呢会显得更加多元一些，各种声音什么样都有。
So our voice should be more diversified with all kinds of opinions. In general, I think there are a lot of discussions, but whether all the discussions can be presented in papers or on TV calls for a process. I believe, judging from the general trend, not comparing this year with the last year, but judging from the general trend, I believe it's going to be more and more open.
我相信是越来越开放。
Media is a global megaforce, affecting emotions, altering opinions, even changing events. One only need witness the election of Donald Trump. In China, as in every country, the media plays patriotic themes. But the line between productive patriotism and counterproductive nationalism can blur. It is trite but true that the media should be responsible. Chinese media can contribute to deepening reform and strengthening rule of law. But to do so, the media, on occasion, might be more creative than cautious. To me, Global Times makes refreshing contributions. Foreigners see a more populist public attitude than what's expressed by government. Chinese see criticisms by foreigners. And by not aligning with other mainstream media in China, by creating its own voice, Global Times enables diversity. That I may disagree with many of Global Times' views is not here relevant. I applaud the diversity. But how much media diversity is optimum for China is a question whose answer will likely be in flux. Media diversity signifies national confidence, both of which over time, as China continues its reforms, should hopefully increase. Watch China's media to keep closer to China.